Hi, today we're gonna jump into the second and third verse of the Gospel of Mark. The last video, we eviscerated the very first verse. Arche tu evangelio Jesu Christou huiou theu, beginning of the Gospel of Mark, a Gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God. Now, we understood what every single word meant. We deep dived into the deep meaning of each single word, and we understood that there's a much more profound meaning to each of the words that make up the very first verse than what you may get just reading very superficially what the verse is saying. We understood that arche, the beginning, is not just doesn't just mark the beginning of the book. Obviously, it's the beginning of the book, so there's much more to it. And we understood that arche is actually the very first word spoken in the Bible, anti-arche, in the beginning. So the arche that Mark is talking about is really that new creation brought forth by the good news of the coming of Jesus Christ. Now, when we move on to verse 2 and verse 3, we're going to get an even more deeper understanding of what this arche, what this new beginning is about. And Mark does that by basically copy and pasting a whole quotation from the Old Testament. So verse 2 and verse 3 in Mark are a quotation from the Old Testament. This is very interesting for many reasons. First of all, Mark is not famous for throwing around quotation from the Old Testament. He actually does it only here at the very beginning of his gospel. If you look at Matthew, if you read Matthew's gospel, you're going to see that Matthew scatters quotation from the Old Testament throughout his gospel. In Mark, you're going to only find one single quotation from the Old Testament, and that's exactly the one that we're going to go over today, and it's at the very beginning of his gospel. There's one other reference to the Old Testament later on, but really this in Mark. But really, this is the only big quotation from the Old Testament, a whole passage of the Old Testament, which is copied and pasted here at the beginning of his gospel. So it must mean something. And this quotation is put there to explain the meaning of the first verse. So we're going to understand better today that first verse is not the title of the gospel, but finds is explanation in verse 2 and verse 3. Mark is saying that this is that beginning of the announcement of the good news brought forth by Jesus is here in this quotation, in this Old Testament passage. What Mark is trying to tell us by putting here this quotation at the beginning of his gospel is, look, the beginning of the good news about Jesus didn't start with the appearance of Jesus and his public ministry. No. It started much earlier than that. It started actually in the Old Testament with the prophecies of the Old Testament, because verse 2 and verse 3 are prophecies taken from the Old Testament. The other interesting part to this is that this way of putting this block quotation, really, that's what it is, at the beginning of his gospel, reminds me a lot of what modern writers usually do, right? If you pick up any book, even before the start of the book, the start of the first chapter, even before the start of the introduction to the book, usually the author likes to put a little quotation. Could be a short sentence, could be a short paragraph from another book, another writing of the past. And it's called epigraph. And this epigraph is put there usually to give a hint to the reader about the topic that the book is going to cover. It's a sort of teasing where the reader reads usually the epigraph, gets a feeling of what the book may be about, but it raises a lot of questions. Why is the author bringing up this quotation? And then, while reading through the book, the reader realizes why the author put that quotation, that epigraph there at the beginning of the book. It's like a sort of um, of search that usually happens throughout the book. And sometimes you don't really understand why the author put that epigraph at the beginning until you reach the very last sentence of the book, right? So it's a sort of teasing that the author put there, um, a sort of trailer. Okay, it gives some hint here and there, and it seems to me that here Mark is kind of using that type of technique, putting this block quotation at the beginning of his gospel. Why? Because he is really saying, look, this is the most important quotation from the Old Testament, according to me. Why? Because this marks the arche to evangelio. This is the prophecy that announces the coming of Jesus Christ. All right, let's jump into the text. We're going to do some transliteration, then some grammar, and then finally we're going to get to the translation of the second and third verse of Mark chapter 1. So the paragraph is pretty long, so we're going to try to go slowly. So the first word here is this kathos. So this kappa is translated as a K, then you have an alpha, a sound, the theta, which is a TH sound, and then the omega, which is a long O sound with an accent. And then this is actually a sigma at the end of the word, which is translated with an S, so kathos. Now, this is a sigma, exactly as this is a sigma. Probably you're more familiar with this one. This is the shape that the sigma takes when it appears at the end of the word. So this is the general sigma that you find within a word, and this is the sigma that you find at the end of the word. The sound is exactly the same. In Hebrew, there are actually several letters that change their shape according to the position. In Greek, there's only one, and it's sigma. So what's the meaning of kathos? Kathos is just an adverb, and it means as, like, exactly as, the same way as. Now, why does Mark start with this adverb in verse 2? Well, because verse 2 is connected with verse 1, right? So this as is not the beginning of the Gospel of Mark, right? Exactly as the first one was not the title of the Gospel, right? Was actually the start of the Gospel. Now, in verse 1, Mark tells us that was the origin, the beginning of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, Son of God. Well, now in verse 2, Marcus is going to explain us where that origin is coming from, where that good news is coming from. Exactly as, and he's going to explain how that good news came about. Now, let's focus on this second word, which is this one, gegraptai. This is actually the verb of the sentence. So you have a gamma there, which is a G sound, and you have an epsilon, which is an E sound, another gamma, a rho, which is a R sound, and alpha, which is an A sound, pi, which is a P sound, tau, which is a T sound, alpha, and iota, which is an I sound, with an accent here. So it's gegraptai. Now, let's try to break down this verb because it's not immediately straightforward to understand the tense of this verb and the person, and the conjugation. All right. So we're gonna break it down in three pieces. The first piece is this ge, and the second piece is this grab, and this the ending tie. Okay. Let's start with this ge. Okay, this is a doubling of this g gamma sound at the beginning of the verb. So actually, the actual root of the verb starts here. This ge is just doubling of the sound, the gig. Okay, and the doubling of the sound is usually a very strong indication that this verb is conjugated in a very particular tense, which is the perfect tense. Okay, the perfect tense in Greek is very similar to the English perfect. So it indicates an action that occurred in the past and but still may have some relationship with the present, may continue in the present, or may have some repercussions in the present. All right. Um, let's jump to the ending of the verb. The ending of the verb is telling us three things: that this verb is conjugated in the third person, and this person is singular, okay? And also it's in the passive, okay, form. So it's third person singular, passive of the perfect tense. Now, once we understood this, we need to just find out what verb we're talking about. Well, we need to find the root. So the root is right here, is this graph that's right here, okay, gamma, rho, alpha, and pi. But actually, this pi is just there because it was hardened by the presence of this tau, okay? When there's no tau here, the pi gets softened into a phi, into a f sound. So the actual root of the verb is graph. All right. If we add an omega at the end, we get grapho, which is the indicative present person, first person singular of the verb to write. Grapho means I write. Okay, I write. All right. Why is that so? There's plenty of words in English that contains that root, graph. Think about, for example, calligraphy. Somebody that writes very well. We say that he has good calligraphy. Or we mentioned at the beginning the word epigraph. It's something that you write at the beginning of something. Think about historiography. It's when you write about history, or geography when you write about the earth, and so on and so forth. So pretty much all the words in English that contain this graph root had something to do with the idea of writing. So if the verb is the verb to write and it's conjugated in the perfect tense, third person singular, passive, how do we translate it? It has been written. It has been written. So putting things together, kathos, as, gegrapatai, it has been written. As it has been written. Pay attention that Mark doesn't say literally as it was written. Doesn't use this past, simple past tense form that represents an action that occurred in the past and finished in the past. He uses a perfect. He's trying to tell us that, of course, this was something that was written in the past as an action that was performed in the past, but it has repercussions today. It has some relationship today. It's something that was written, but is still relevant today. That's the idea of the use of the perfect tense. All right, let's move on to the second part, which is where Mark tells us where we find that written. Mark is about to quote, to give us a quotation from the Old Testament, and here's exactly where we're going to find this quotation. So he says, "En to Isaia to profete." This is a whole expression, so we're going to try to analyze it all together. Now, I'm going to draw the attention on this N. So this letter that looks like a V is actually nu. It's an N sound, N, and it just means in. It's a preposition that indicates the place where you find something, right? Now, in Greek, every preposition requires a certain case. Okay, it's pretty much fixed. Well, in Greek, the preposition "en" wants always the dative case. Okay, it's pretty much a rule. All right, if you want to specify the place where you're staying, where you're finding something, you need to put "en" plus whatever that place is in the dative case. All right. Now, where are we going to find the dative? Well, right here, I'm going to show you right now. And I'm going to draw your attention on this little diacritical mark here in all these four terms. You see, this actually is called iota. It looks like a iota subscript. Okay, it's a iota written under the vowel. Well, it's there to indicate that all these terms, these four terms, are declared in the dative case. Why are they declared in the dative case? Because n requires the dative. All right. Now, here you see a duplication, toe and toe. All right. Where those are actually definite articles. Okay. In the first verse of Mark, we saw two. Okay. Tau, omicron, upsilon. Okay. And we said that this was the definite article in the genitive case. Okay. So it's genitive case of the definite article. Okay. So how do you translate that? Of the, of the. Okay. Well, and this is used for masculine singular. Okay. Arche tu evangelio. Okay, the beginning of the gospel. Okay. Now, guess what? This toe is basically the same thing. Okay. So it's still the same definite article, the. Okay. But it's the class in the dative case, as we said. All right. And so in this case, the dative is there because we have this in preposition. So en to means in the. Okay. So en to means in the. But again, it's just for the masculine and singular. All right. As we see, the definite article is not as in English, there's always the. In Greek, the definite article changes according to the case, according to the gender, and so on, and according to if it's singular or plural. So ento is in the, well, and then what do we have here? Is a ia. You see this capital letter is telling us that this word is actually a proper name. So this letter that looks like an H is actually an eta, so a long E sound, okay, like that. And then you have your sigma, right? And then you have your alpha, your iota, and your alpha with an accent here. Now, look at these two dots. This is called diaeresis. Okay, why is it there? Well, because usually two vowels, alpha and iota, together should make a diphthong. A diphthong is just when two vowels are basically together. Okay, and whenever there is an accent, appears an accent on a diphthong, usually the accent appears on the second vowel of the diphthong, but when you pronounce it, the accent is actually on the first letter of the diphthong. Now, there are exceptions, like here, where you have something that may look like a diphthong with the accent on the second vowel, but still you want the accent to be there on the second vowel. You don't want to have it move to the first vowel. So to indicate that this is not really a diphthong, that's why you put the diaeresis there, to say that this, you don't have to pronounce it as Isaiah, but Isaiah. All right, the accent is on the yod, Isaiah. Okay, who is Isaiah? Is the prophet Isaiah, of course. All right, prophet Isaiah. Now, in ento Isaiah means in the Isaiah, literally. Okay, so this is kind of a redundant type of article. Can be translated in the book of Isaiah, all right, if we want, but literally it means in the Isaiah. To, so it's another repetition of the same article. Profete, there's not much to say here. It means prophet, okay? It comes from the preposition pro and the verb phemi. Phemi in Greek means to say, to talk. Pro is a preposition that means in advance. So a prophet is somebody that talks in advance, right? If you prophesize, it means that you say something in advance before it happens, all right? So what's the meaning of this verse? Simply, as it has been written in Isaiah the prophet. So we learn here that this quotation that is going to start afterward is taken from the prophet Isaiah, so comes from Isaiah. But is it really? Well, if you look a little bit closer and you start reading until the end of verse 2, you're going to soon realize that actually this quotation that starts here and ends here, so which covers half of the second verse and all the third verse, is actually a double quotation. It's actually two quotations combined together. The first quotation starts here and ends here at the end of verse 2. This is the first quotation. And then there's another quotation that occupies verse 3. So these are actually two different quotations combined. Now, the interesting thing is that the first quotation, which is this one here, in the second verse, all right, is not from Isaiah. The second one is in verse 3. So this opened up a whole, as you can imagine, discussion, furious discussion among scholars. Now, did Mark quote Isaiah wrongly? Does Mark not know about the Old Testament? Did Mark ever read the Old Testament correctly? Like all sort of arguments, all sorts of hypotheses. Why is Mark saying that you can find this in the prophet Isaiah if actually the very first quotation is not from Isaiah? You're never going to find that in Isaiah, but only the second one. Why didn't Mark quote correctly? Why didn't Mark specify that the first quotation is actually from Malachi, not Isaiah, and so on and so forth? So all type of conjectures there. What we know, let's stick to the fact, is the following. The first quotation that starts with this word, idu, okay, and ends with this word, su, is from the prophet Malachi, okay? Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, okay? The second quotation, which starts with the word phone and ends with the word autu, is actually from Isaiah, as we said, chapter 40, verse 3. Okay, so these are two completely different quotations from two completely different passages in the Old Testament. Okay, they're both prophets. Isaiah is one of the most important prophets. Malachi is one of the minor prophets. Mark takes something from Malachi, takes something from Isaiah, combines them together in one single quotation, and says, as it was written in Isaiah. Something wrong there. Is he hiding that this doesn't come from Isaiah? Did he get it wrong? And so on and so forth. One thing to consider is that we have different manuscripts here. And some manuscripts have this expression, ento Isaiah te profete, in the prophet Isaiah. Some have another expression where Isaiah completely disappears and it just says, as it was written in the prophets, plural. Okay, so some manuscripts have in the prophet Isaiah, some other manuscripts have in the prophets. Now, again, scholars have been debating on what happened here. Is in the prophets the true original version of Mark or not? Because in the prophets would have much more sense. It would be correct, right? As it was written in the prophets, because there are two prophets here, Malachi and Isaiah. And then you would quote the first verse from Malachi, the second verse is from Isaiah. That would be completely correct. If you say, as it was written in the prophet Isaiah, but then you start quoting Malachi, well, there's something wrong there. So which one is it? Well, turns out that again, some manuscripts, we're going to see them, some manuscripts have the expression and in the prophet Isaiah, some don't have in the prophets. But if you think about it, it's very easy to understand which one of the two is the original one. And the original one is the one that you see here in the prophet Isaiah. Why? Because if you think about it, and if you think that the original was in the prophets, why would somebody, a copyist, come up and say and correct that with something that would be not completely accurate? If Mark had written as it was written in the prophets, blah, 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 nobody would have come up with the idea of adding or changing that in the prophets with in the prophet Isaiah, because in the prophets is 100% accurate. There are two prophets here. The expression in the prophet Isaiah is not 100% accurate. It's half, 50% accurate. Okay. So a copyist would never change a correct expression with an expression that is not accurate. It's just 50% accurate. There would be no sense at all. It's unimaginable that something would do something like that. While the opposite is actually true. Think about it. You may have a copyist there that is copying this manuscript, and then he reads from the Greek text, and he reads as it was written in the prophet Isaiah, and then he immediately realizes that the verse that comes after that quotation is not from Isaiah. And so it's very likely that that copyist either may have thought, look, probably there's an error here in the manuscript I'm copying, so let me change that, because this is not Isaiah, this is Malachi. So let me correct that. Let me take out Isaiah and let's change it to just in the prophets. It's going to retain the meaning of the whole. So I'm not going to change the meaning of the whole passage, but I'm going to make it from 50 to 100% accurate. So that makes total sense. Okay. So this must mean that the original was the not 100% accurate way of quoting. Okay. Mark very likely wrote this that you see here, ento Esaia te profete. Now, this brings forth another bigger question. Why is Mark quoting only Isaiah if the first part of the quotation is actually from Malachi? So let me show you quickly the Codex Sinaiticus. Remember, we talked about it. It's probably the most important manuscript, definitely the oldest we have, where we can find a Greek copy of the New Testament. It's a 4th century manuscript. And of course, one of the most authoritative of all. If you remember, last time we ended up here, right here. This is the end of Mark 1:1 with this abbreviation, right? Jesu Christou. And then we also commented on the fact that in between the lines, there's this addition here that says Uyuthu, but this is an addition of a corrector of the manuscript. So let's start with the second verse and try to decipher the single words. We already know how it reads. Would be kathos, and you find here exactly kathos. Okay, and then the verb gegraptai, it's split between this line ge and graptai. There you have it. Okay. All right. And then we know that it should say en to Esaia to profete. And here you have it. En to, this letter that looks like a W is your omega, right? So en to. And again, the word Esaia is split between this line and this line here. There you go. And as you see, probably the copies here at the beginning have forgot to put the S, and so he put it in very small here. Remember, this letter looks like a C, is the script, is the uncial script for the capital sigma, capital S. Okay, so esa ia, and then you have to profete. Okay, there you go. So the most important manuscript of all, it has that in there. It has the expression in the prophet Isaiah. It doesn't have in the prophets or anything like that. This is only something that is found in later manuscripts, which is another indication that it was just a correction made later on, probably by a copyist that wanted to correct what he thought was a mistake. But actually, we're gonna discover that it's probably not a mistake. There's a very important reason on why for Mark it's not necessary to mention the prophet Malachi. All right, let's jump into the grammar of this first quotation from Malachi 3:1. Of course, this is Mark's translation of Malachi 3:1. Malachi 3:1 is written in Hebrew, it's part of the Hebrew Bible. So this is Mark translation of that verse in Malachi. Then we're going to jump into the Hebrew, but one thing at a time. So the verse, the quotation starts here and ends here. Let's go slowly because things are getting more complicated. Sentences are getting longer. We're going to see that there's a comma here. And in fact, this sentence is split in two. So the first part that starts here and ends here is the principal sentence. And this sentence here, the second part that starts with this word hos, is actually a subordinate clause, a relative clause. So let's start analyzing first the principal sentence. All right, it starts here and ends here. Let's try to find the verb. Okay, the verb is here. Easy in this case. Why? Because this verb is conjugated at the first person singular of the indicative present. So the plainest of all. It means I send. Okay. In Greek, usually when we refer to verbs, we quote the verbs in the indicative present first person singular, right? In English, usually when we quote verbs, we conjugate them at the infinite tense, the verb to be, the verb to like, the verb to go. We don't say the verb I go or the verb I like or the verb I am, right? But in Greek, usually there's this common understanding that we refer to a verb, we quote the verb in the first person singular of the indicative present. So this is exactly the case. The verb apostello means to send. I send. Okay, this is the first person singular of the present tense. I send. It's made up of this preposition, the preposition apo, which is a very common one, so we better know this. The preposition apo indicates usually a movement away from a place, okay, away from a place. And then the verb stello, which usually means to set, to put. So apostello means to put something away from you. So when you set something or you bring something, take something away from you, is because you move it away from you. So you send it away. So apostello means to send out. Okay, we could translate. I send out. Okay, I send out. That's the verb. What is this word here at the beginning? Idu. Well, idu is a particular conjugation of a verb, which is actually a very important verb in Greek, which is eido, which means I see, and also I know. Because if I see, automatically I know something, I get aware of something. So the verb eido mean on the base term, the base meaning is to see, but most of the time it actually means to know. Okay, to see, to know. Now, this particular verbal form, idu, is an imperative. Okay, it's an imperative. In a particular tense, um, aorist imperative. Okay, let me write it down. It's aorist imperative. Um, how do we translate this? It's like see, look. Okay, so it's not really a verb. Well, it is a verb, but it's used to attract the attention. Okay, so the real verb of the phrase is apostello. Okay, which I sent. This is more of a introductory word to attract the attention uh, of whoever is listening to you. It's like saying look or listen. Usually it's translated with behold. It's used usually by God to attract, to draw the attention of whoever he's talking to on very important things. So when the sentence starts with idu, you should really pay attention because God is saying something very, very important. Usually we're talking about very important prophecies. Okay. And that's why this prophecy starts with the word idu. It means behold, behold, pay attention, be aware. Okay. Pay strict attention. I send, which could also you know translate in the future tense, right? The idea is I will send. Okay, beware, behold, I will send. And now we're going to have to find the object. I will send what? I will send who? Well, here it is. Ton angelon. Okay, so a few things here on this expression. So ton angelonmu is the object. Okay, is the object. Is the object of is whatever God is going to send. Okay, well, you already know basically all of these terms. Ton is the definite article, so it's the. Okay, now we already learned that the definite article in Greek, the ending of the definite article changes every time it's attached to different case. So we learn that the article in the genitive case, okay, takes the ending omicron upsilon, okay, in the masculine or neuter. Two, we saw that. Archaic two evangelio, okay, of the gospel. Then we learned before that if it's in the dative case, okay, it takes the omega with a subscript iota, like that, with a circumflex accent on top. And now we're learning that if it's in the accusative um, case, it takes the ending omicron nu, okay, with the accent on top, ton. Okay, now what is the accusative case? Is the case used when a word is an object. Okay, if a word is the object of the sentence, then it's declared in the accusative case. Okay, these are all masculine singular endings. Okay, to, toe, and ton. Okay, now why is it masculine singular? Because angelus is masculine and singular. Okay, and again, they're both they're object, right? It's an object. I will send ton angelon, and so also angelos takes the ending on to indicate that is in an object. Okay, in the accusative case. So what does ton angelon means? Well, ton angelon, we already know, we already saw this word. Angelos means messenger, right? We learned that evangelion means good message, good news, right? From the word angelos, which is nothing more than a messenger. And we learned that, for example, in English, the word angel is derived from the Greek angelos, because the angel is a messenger of God. And in general, in Greek, angelos doesn't mean an angel with the wings, it just means a person that delivers a message. So, a messenger. Okay, so what God is saying here is, behold, I send, or I will send the messenger. Now, what is this mu here? This is a personal pronoun. Okay, it means uh, of me. So basically, my. Okay, now you may recognize here the ending. Okay, o, omicron upsilon. That sounds like an u, mu. So the personal pronoun, the first singular. So this is a first person singular. Okay, pronoun, personal pronoun in the genitive case. Okay, so it means of me. Now, this is very common in Greek. Um, there are possessive adjectives in Greek, but often instead of using a possessive adjective, instead of saying my angel or my messenger, um, the Greek language says the messenger of me. Okay, it's a very common way of speaking. Okay, so this is not exception. So what it says here is, behold, I will send the angel of me, which we will translate as, I will send my angel. Okay, this is very interesting because you're going to see this three times in this sentence, this type of construction. Mu, of me, su, which is the second person singular, of you, your, and also here, su. So these are all personal pronoun in the genitive case in here in the first personal singular with the mu, which is very easy to recognize because it reminds of the English me. Okay, and here we have the su with the sigma, which is the second. So it's like you. Okay, of you. All right. So mu of me, su of you. So we unlock the first part of the prophecy. God is promising of sending his messenger. Now, this is an important specification. Prosopou su. Okay. Now, prosopou su. Pro is a preposition and means before. Okay, and it holds a genitive case after it. So pro needs a genitive case, and in fact you find it here. You see that this name, this noun that is attached to the preposition before, is in the case in the genitive case, and this word is actually a singular neuter term, which is prosopon. Okay, prosopon. Prosopon literally means what you see in front. Okay, and so prosopon is what you see in front of a person. So a face. That's the face. So prosopon means face. Prosopo means literally before the face. Okay, before the face, su, of you. Okay, we already understood that of you can be translated as your, before your face. Now, what does that mean? I will send my messenger before your face. Well, what you see in front, the face, also represents your appearance. Okay, what other people see of you. So it's your appearance, your presence. So this simply means I will send a messenger, my messenger, before you appear, before people are going to be able to see you. All right, before your coming. We can just translate it as before you. Okay, I will send a messenger before you, before your physical appearance. Okay, this is the meaning of the first part of the prophecy. Now let's move on to the relative clause. Okay, the relative clause is introduced by, as we mentioned, by this relative pronoun has, um, which is a masculine singular pronoun in the nominative case, which is a subject. So this has is the subject of the relative clause, and is meaning is who. Okay. Now, um, who is this has attached to? Who's referring to? To angelon. Okay. So I will send my messenger who? Okay, that. Okay. This is what my angel is going to do. Okay. My angel will do this. Who kataskewaze. Okay, this is the verb. Okay, this is the verb. Comes from the verb kataskewazo. Okay, with the ending with the z and then omega. Kataskewazo. Um, this is the Greek letter for the z basically. Now you see that it gets softened in this case into a sigma, which indicates that this verb is conjugated in the future tense. Okay, which makes sense because this is something that the messenger that God will send will do in the future. Okay. Now, what does the word kataskewazo mean? Kataskewazo mean generally, basically, build, construct, make ready. Okay. It's like prepare something by doing stuff. Okay. Think about when you prepare your room for the coming of your new baby. Okay. You start building the crib, you start painting the walls, and so on. That's the idea of kataskewazo. You prepare something by building, by smoothing, by constructing, and so on, with some manual work. Okay. That's the idea of kataskewazo. So this messenger is gonna make something, is gonna build something, is gonna prepare something, is gonna make something ready. What is that thing that is gonna make ready? We need to look for an object. Remember the object, the sign of an object, ton. We saw it here with the ending, with the nu, with the n. Ton angelon was an object. Well, guess what? You find it here. Ten odon. That's the object. Okay. You see this new at the end that tells you that this is an object. And what is this 10? Well, you probably already figured that out. It's very similar to ton. Okay, so ton was the masculine singular of the definite article the. Well, guess what? 10 is the feminine version of it, the feminine singular of the same article. So we have 10 hodon. Now, what's the meaning of this term? Road, road. Okay, road, way, path. Okay, why is that? Well, think about one word that we have in English, odometer. Okay, if you drive a car, you know what the odometer is. Is that thing in your car that tells you how many miles your car has run so far. Um, and in fact, odometer means, uh, indicates a tool that is used to measure the road, right? Hold on. All right, it's the road. Um, so think about odometer to remember that this word here represents the road. Okay, so this messenger of God will prepare, will make ready the road, the way of you again, your way. Okay, your way, your road. So let's put everything together and we have the translation. Behold, I send or I will send my messenger before you, who, messenger, who will prepare the road for you, or your road, or your way. Okay. One last thing that I want to draw your attention on is this accent here. You see this word angelon? It seems it has two accents there. The first accent on the first alpha, and then there's another accent on the last omicron. And in fact, we read this as angelon. Okay, this is called this accent. This second accent is not the proper accent of the word angelos. It is called enclitic accent, and it works like this. It's because there is this word after this personal pronoun you see has no accent. It's because the accent has been moved to the previous word. All right. There are some words in Greek, especially personal pronouns, that tend to do that. They're called enclitic words. They tend to lose their accent, and if possible, their accent is borrowed by the word before. It's used. It's a way of making the sentence flow better. Okay, instead of saying ton angelon mu, because you would stop there, there would be an accent of a one syllable word. It doesn't flow, right? Ton angelon mu pro. It doesn't flow, right? So what they do is that the accent that mu should take actually is moved to the last syllable of the previous word. And so the two are put together, the angelon and mu are basically combined together in one single word with two accents, right? Angelon mu, okay? Ton angelon mu. Okay, it's very similar to what we do in English when we basically, for example, we say, instead of saying I like them, we say I like them. Okay, where them gets combined, and then there's only and loses the accent, right? And you only hear the first accent. I like them, and you don't say I like them. Okay, I like them. The same thing is here. Angelon. Okay, you see the same thing happening here. Sue lost its accent. This other Sue lost its accent. What happened to this accent? It just disappeared. Why? Because they don't want to put it here, because otherwise you would have two accents back to back. Not good. Wouldn't flow, right? So it's simply the accent of Sue is simply lost and becomes prosopusu. Okay, prosopusu. Same thing here. The accent doesn't have anywhere to go because odon already has an accent here. So there's no point in putting another accent here. So Su just loses and drops the accent. Okay, let's compare the Greek translational mark with the original quotation in Hebrew in the Old Testament. Why are we doing this? Why do we want to go into the Hebrew? Because we're going to discover something very, very important. So this exercise is not just for the sake of checking the Hebrew, it's because we're going to discover something very significant. So I'm going to go very slowly. Just you don't have to know Hebrew. Just follow me word by word, and we're going to try to match every single Hebrew word with every single word in Mark. All right. So just pay attention. Remember that Hebrew works from right to left, so we need to go backwards. Okay. So the first word here reads hini, hini. Okay. So there's the hey, this letter hey that sounds like an H. This letter is the letter nun that sounds like an N, and then there is the yod at the end. So it sounds like hini, and it's a verb, as in Greek, is an interjection, and it just means behold, pay attention, look. All right. So Mark translates this hini with idu, literal translation. So far, so good. Then we have the verb. Okay, this verb reads sholeach. Okay, sholeach. Sholeach. Um, why? Because this letter that looks like a W, it's a shin. It sounds like a sh. This little dot here up on the left is actually a vowel. It's the O sound, so this sounds like shol. These two dots on the bottom sound like a very short E. Okay, and then you have this letter, which is the het letter, which looks like a hey, but it doesn't have this gap here, and it sounds like an H, but stronger. It's not h, but h, like Bach in German, like the ch in German, like the famous composer Bach. So this is sholeach. Okay, comes from the verb shala, which means to send out. Okay, so Mark translate this verb as apostello. Okay, to send out. Okay, pay attention. I send or I will send out. So far so good. Mark is translating word by word. Okay, now in Greek we have ton angelon mu, my messenger. Well, guess what? In Hebrew we're going to find the same expression, my angel, mal aki. Okay, my messenger. Um, the yod at the end, the sound I at the end, malaki, means my. Okay, that is how Hebrew change a word to make it to attach the possessive adjective. The possessive adjective in Hebrew is attached at the end of each word, and it modifies the end of the word. So the word would be malak, which means messenger in Hebrew. Malaki means my messenger. Okay. Now, do you see something? Did you notice something very curious? Malaki. Okay, what is this quotation taken from? Malachi. Well, guess what? Malachi, or Malachi in English, is exactly the name of the prophet. The prophet name Malachi, or Hebrew Malachi, means my messenger. Okay, pretty curious coincidence here. Okay. Now, the first three words represent exactly the first one, two, three, four, five words in Greek. Behold, I'll send my angel. It's a perfect literal translation from the Hebrew. Okay. Now let's move on to the next word. The next word starts with this letter, which is a vav or wav, which is a conjunction. In Hebrew, this letter is used all the time to indicate a conjunction. It means and. Okay, and it's attached to the beginning of the next word. Okay, so this is the first change. Okay, remember in Mark we have I will send my angel who will do something. Okay, who will do something. Here in Hebrew, the text says, "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he will." So first, before prosoposu, the Hebrew has what the verb that is referred to what this messenger is gonna do, supposed to do. Okay, and the verb is this one here, this three letter here, which is finna. So this first letter is an F. This is the nun. This dot inside the nun is called dagish. Is doubling. Dagish means that it's doubling sound. That's why it sounds like finna. And this hey at the end just makes this a vowel sound long. Finna. Okay. This is a verb that comes from the verb pana. Okay, the verb pana. The sound p, f in Hebrew is the same letter. If there's a dagish, if there's a dot inside, it takes the stronger sound p. If it doesn't, it takes the softer sound of f, but they're considered to be the same letter. So the verb is pana, and pana is a very important verb in Hebrew. It has a very specific meaning. It means turn and look. Turn and look. Okay, so that's the idea. If you turn your attention and look after something, turn and look, it's like we could translate it as look after. Okay, when you look after something, is because you're taking care of something. Okay, and that's what Mark translate with kataskewase. So this messenger in Hebrew is gonna turn and look after something. Is gonna take care of something. So Mark decides to use this verb in Greek, which means we saw it prepare, make ready. Okay? Make ready. What? Well, this symbol here, this dash, simply means that these two words in Hebrew are together. So these three-letter words here is just attached to the verb here. Okay? So this messenger will take care of what? Derek. Okay, this is the D sound, dalet. This is the resh, the R sound, and this is the K sound. So derek. Okay, derek means road, way, path. Okay, so derek is the Hebrew for hodam. Okay, so we'll take care of the road. Okay, of the road. He will take care of the road. Careful here. We see the first difference. The Hebrew text simply says, and will take care of the road simply. In Greek, Mark elaborates on that and says, who will take care of the road, su, of you, of your road, okay, of your way. This is something that is not in Hebrew, okay, and Mark adds for clarity. Let's keep this in mind and let's move on to the last part. There's still this part missing, right? This part is missing from Mark. Well, this is here, exactly the last part. Mark decided to anticipate this part, not a big change. The meaning is exactly the same, it's just preference in terms of translation, but the meaning is the same. In Hebrew is lefanai, lefana, okay, lefanai. Lefanai is there's this first preposition le, which means for, okay, and then fanai, which, as you see, has the same root as this, okay, the same two letters, it's the same root. It indicates this idea of turn and looking, because uh, because panai is in Hebrew means literally your face, okay, your face. So you turn and look at your face, okay, the same is the same root. So for your, sorry, for not your, for fanai, and again this yod that is the end is similar, not the same, but similar to this yod. Here this yod meant my messenger. This I means basically the same thing, is before my face, okay, is a possessive adjective in the first person singular. This is the most striking part of the whole thing that I would like to address your attention on. This is the first person singular, so it means before, literally means before my face. So God in Malachi says, behold, I will send my messenger and he will prepare the way for my appearance. All right, how does Mark translate this? Behold, I will send my messenger before your appearance, who will prepare the way of you, or for you, or your way. You see the stress that Mark's put in this your, but in Hebrew it says my. Is Mark translating wrongly from Hebrew? I don't think so. There must be a meaning why Mark feels the necessity of changing the first person singular in Hebrew into a second person singular in Greek. It cannot be an accident. Mark repeats this su of you twice. He wants to stress that this face, this appearance is of you, and this way is of you. Who you is this? But before answering this question, there's a couple of things more that I would like to draw your attention to. Let's try to compare the translation of the of this Malachi 3:1, this quotation from Mark, the Greek translation that Mark made, with the translation of the Septuagint. What is the Septuagint? The Septuagint was the accepted, widely spread and common Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. At that time, there were two main vernacular languages used in the world. One was the Aramaic that was used in the East, and the other was the Greek that was used in the West. And so, uh, among those speaking Greek, the Hebrew Bible had been translated in Greek, right? And the tradition has it that there were these 70 Jewish scholars, and from this number 70 came the name Septuagint. Septuagint means 70. That got together and somehow translated the Hebrew Bible, and they all agreed on the same translation. So it became the benchmark for the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Now, Mark, having the Septuagints at his disposal, could have done a very simple thing. He could have just copy and pasted the Greek translation of the Septuagint of Malachi 3:1. But if we go and read, as you can see here, the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew original that we just saw, we're going to see that Mark doesn't do that. Mark doesn't take the Septuagint and copy and paste it in his gospel. He seems to be translating himself the Hebrew Bible. Okay, let's read here and see what the differences are between the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew Bible and the version of Mark. Okay, so here on top you have the Septuagint translation, and here on the bottom you have Mark. All right, so they both start with "idu," so they agree that that Hebrew word needs to be translated as "behold." And then here the Septuagint introduced this personal pronoun ego, which means I. Very simple word. Think about the word egocentric. It means a person that is centered on himself. It is a person that always talks in first person, I, right? So ego in Greek means I. Now, why does Mark um, um, forgets about ego? Because personal pronouns in Greek, like in Latin, like in most languages that are derived from Latin, like Spanish, like Italian, you don't need to put personal pronouns. Why? Because you have the verb, and the verb from the verb and from the ending of the word of the verb, you already understand if the pronoun is a first person, is a second person, is a third person, singular or plural, right? In English, we don't understand, right? If we say like, we don't know if it's I the like, or you the like, or they the like, and so on. But in Greek, as well as in Latin, every single person, and singular and plural, they have different endings. So from the verb, you already understand the pronoun. Now, that's why it's usually understood and it's not put there. The Septuagint decide to put it there, it's fine, but not a big difference. Okay, not a big difference. Now, the verb "I will send," small difference. Mark chooses the verb apostello. The Septuagint use the word ex apostello, so it's the same verb. You see here is the same verb, but with an X in front. X is another preposition in Greek that means out of. So it's like an intensive version of apostello. The meaning is exactly the same. It stressed on the fact that you're sending away, sending out. Okay, X means out of. All right. So far the translation is pretty much the same. And then ton angelonmo and ton angelonmo. Okay, exactly the same. So the translation here so far kind of agrees with the Septuagint. Okay, here is where the two translation kind of diverge a little bit. Okay, why? Because the Septuagint follows exactly the Hebrew. Okay, if you remember in the Hebrew, after this part, there was a letter. It's called a vav. That is, we saw it. It's an end. It's a conjunction. All right. Well, Mark doesn't use an end. In Greek, it would be kai. Okay, it would be kai. And in Greek is kai. Okay, you don't see any kai here. All right. What happens with Mark? What does Mark do? Well, Mark use a relative pronoun. So instead of saying, "I will send my angel and he will take care," he says, "I will send my angel who will take care." All right, it's the same meaning, it's the same, message. The translation is basically the same. It says the same thing, but it's a nice grammatical change on the literal translation. You see that the Septuagint follows exactly the Hebrew. You use kai, right? Mark deviates a little bit, and I think that from here we can already understand the way Mark's mind work. Okay, this is the kind of translation that somebody that is very familiar with Greek would do. Okay, this is somebody that knows Hebrew but also knows Greek very well. If it would be simply a Jewish person with some knowledge of Greek, they will probably go with the literal translation. The fact that Mark knows how to handle this and is able to change the and with a relative clause, it means that's a step um, higher in terms of sophistication in the structure of the sentence. This is not just a coincidence. Okay, I'm stressing this because the Hebrew language is a pretty simple language. Okay, it's one of the very first language, if not the very first language ever built, and it's you see it in at least the biblical Hebrew is very simple in terms of structure of the sentences. The syntax is minimal. It's usually built upon three pieces: verb, subject, and object. And then there's some little expansions here and there through prepositions, but that's the building block of every single sentence. And all these blocks are connected with the letter vav, okay, with the letter and. Okay, so I did this and I did that, and then you did this and that did that. All right, that's how usually the Hebrew Bible works. It's a lot of small sentences connected by a wav, by an and. That's the typical structure of the Hebrew syntax. Okay. On the other hand, in Greek, a different type of structure is usually used. Um, Greek doesn't like the repetition of kai, and. That's not the way Greek talks. Okay, that's not the way Greek used to talk. Greek, with respect to Hebrew, is a much more sophisticated language in terms of syntax. It's in terms of construction of the sentences. Sentences are usually longer, much longer. Latin takes from Greek the same thing. If you have studied, for example, Cicero, one of the most important writers in the Latin world, sometimes you literally get lost in one single sentence. You can have sentences that last an entire paragraph, and you have to read it twice, three times, four times to really find the subject of the sentence or where the verb is, and so on. It's really complicated. It can get really complicated. So that speaks to the highly sophisticated structure of the syntax in Greek and Latin that likes to have a principal sentence and then a lot of clauses, a lot of subordinates. Okay, that's the way that the Greek language is structured naturally. A lot of and doesn't flow. Okay, it's not natural in the Greek language, and that's exactly what we see here. Mark doesn't like the fact that two small sentences like this: "I will send my angel and my messenger, and my messenger will take care of the way of my way," are connected with an and. He doesn't feel the need to have an and there. He's like, I can just put a relative pronoun there, and with a relative clause, and that sounds much better, flows much better. So this is a Greek type of mindset. It's not a Jewish type of mindset. So we understand that the degree of sophistication of Mark that really shows a very good familiarity with Greek. This is the first point, very important point. The other point here is the verb. So you see here in the Hebrew Bible, sorry, in the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew Bible, the verb used is epiblepsetai, which comes from the verb epiblepo, which means really to turn and look. So this is really the literal translation of the Hebrew Bible. Remember, pana, okay, is turn and look, okay. This is literally the same verb in Hebrew. Now, Mark is a little more sophisticated, doesn't stop at the literal translation, but he goes one step forward to give the exact meaning of that verb in the context. So, what does turn and look means in this context? In this context, it means to take care of. Okay, and we saw that he used the verb kataskewazo, which means to prepare, to make something ready. All right. And then you have hodon, and the same thing, ten hodon. So the same thing, the road. And then look at here. This is the most important part. The Septuagint has prosopo, mu. Okay, before my face, before my appearance. Okay, before I appear, I manifest myself. Okay. Well, what does Mark do? He translate with prosopus su. You see the difference? This is exactly what we're talking about. So the Septuagint is a literal translation of the Hebrew. Mark does not translate literally. First of all, does not copy and paste from the Septuagint. This is the first important piece of the information that we have here. Mark goes to the source. Mark goes to the Hebrew Bible and translates it himself. Okay. And this is his interpretation of the Hebrew Bible. All right. And this is really the most important change that he makes. He transforms this mu, which means we saw it of me, my, into of you, okay, your. Now, this is not, from a theoretical point of view, an acceptable change, right? If the original text says my or mine, you cannot change that in your, because you're changing first person singular into the second person singular. So you're changing the meaning of the original text, right? So we see that the Septuagint literally translates from the Hebrew. Mark doesn't, and in particular, there's a big difference here. There is a big change in meaning from a first person to a second person singular.